You are welcome to GSS to the release of the monthly indicator of economic growth for the month of November 2025, which is part of the last quarter of 2025. To do the presentation is our covering statistician, Dr. Asa Idrisu. So please, let's mute our phones so that we minimize the disturbances. So thank you once again. Doc, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Francis. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. Today, the Ghana Statistical Service is pleased to present to you the monthly indicator of economic growth for November 2025. The release, as we started doing from July, matters because it gives policymakers, businesses, households, investors, and the general public an early and reliable signal of how Ghanaian economy is performing before the official quarterly statistics on GDP are released. In times of uncertainty, timely information, as we know, is not a luxury at all. It is actually a necessity. And that's exactly what the Mieg is designed to provide. So one may ask, what is the monthly indicator of economic growth? Train, transport, trade, communication, financial service, and many more. The Mieg is built using international standards, specifically the United Nations System of National Accounts, to ensure credibility and comparability. Most importantly, the Mieg serves as an early indicator of quarterly GDP trends. It helps us understand where the economy is heading before the full GDP data becomes available. Now, how should we interpret the Mieg? The Mieg is carefully aligned with Ghana's quarterly national accounts. Where possible, it uses the same data sources. This means that when the Mieg shows stronger or weaker growth, it usually points in the same direction as the upcoming GDP estimates. However, the Mieg should be interpreted with appropriate caution, as we always make you know. And why do we say that? First, it is based on an early and also less detailed data. Second, it can be more volatile than quarterly GDP. And third, it reflects the first available information which may be revised later. So in short, the Mieg tells us the direction and momentum of the economy, not the final score. Now, how does the Mieg fit into the broader economic statistics calendar? For quarter 4 of 2025, the October and November Mieg serve as the first and second leading indicators before the official GDP estimate is released. The third and final Mieg indicator for 2025 quarter 4, which is the December 2025 Mieg, will be published alongside the 2025 quarter 4 GDP on 11th March 2026, inshallah. This approach ensures that users receive timely signals while still preventing or preserving the integrity of the final GDP numbers. I must say that all figures we are going to present to you today for the November 2025 Mieg are provisional. Just like quarterly and annual GDP, the Mieg follows 3-stage revisions, which is the provisional, and then later we revise it, and then we have a final estimate. As more complete information becomes available, the figures may change. This revision policy is not a weakness at all. It is a hallmark of transparent and responsible statistics. Now, let us turn to the headline results. The monthly indicator of economic growth index for November 2025 is 122.7, up from 117.7 recorded in November 2024. What does this mean? It means that overall economic activity in Ghana was 4.2% higher in November 2025 than in the same month in the previous year. This 4.2% is what we call the growth rate from the Mieg index. In plain language, Ghana produced 4.2% more goods and services in November 2025 than it did 1 year earlier. It is important to note that the Mieg is not seasonally adjusted, since we don't yet have a longer series to enable deseasonalization. Monthly economic activity can rise and fall due to seasonal factors such as harvest cycles and increased end-of-year services demand. For this reason, we focus on the year-on-year growth, not month-on-month changes. Despite this volatility, the data shows a clear upward trend from November 2023 to November 2025. Let us now look at the sectoral performance of the economy from the perspective of the Mieg, and we'll do this by examining the growth rates as well as the contribution of each sector to overall growth rates. Let me explain contribution to growth because it is often misunderstood. Contribution to growth tells us how much each sector adds to the overall growth of 4.2% in the case of November 2025 growth rate. Let us begin with agriculture. The agriculture sector recorded a growth rate of 4.1% in November 2025 compared to a growth rate of 3.8% in November 2024. The agriculture sector contributed 32.4% to the overall growth rate of 4.2% recorded in November 2025. The improvement in growth in agriculture actually is reflecting stronger performance in fisheries and crop production. Agriculture, as we know, is naturally seasonal, but the data shows a steady upward trend over the past 2 years. This tells us that the sector remains resilient and continues to support food supply and rural incomes. Let's turn to industry. The picture is more subdued when we look at the performance in the industrial sector. Industry grew by 0.4% in November 2025, contributing 2.5% to the overall growth of 4.2% in November 2025. This is a slowdown, especially if you compare it to the 6.2% growth recorded in November 2024. The main reason is a decline in mining and quarrying activities, particularly oil and gas production. This slowdown signals emerging challenges in extractive industries, which have historically been the key contributors to growth of the economy. Now to services, which is the largest and the most dynamic part of the economy. Services expanded by 6.7% in November 2025 and contributed 57.7% to the overall growth of 4.2%. Although this is a very strong growth, it is slower than the 10.2% recorded in November 2024. This growth was mainly driven by information and communication services, reflecting increased digital activity. This confirms the continuing importance of services as the engine of Ghana's economic growth in recent times. The analysis shows that even though industry grew slightly, its impact on total growth was small, while services carried most of the weight. When we compare November 2025 with November 2024, one message is clear. The economy is still growing, but the pace of growth has slowed. Total growth declined from 7.1% in November 2024 to 4.2% in November 2025. Agriculture improved modestly. Industry slowed sharply. Services remained strong but cooled. This pattern explains why overall growth moderated. So, what does the November Meg tell us about the quarter four GDP that we are yet to release in March? If you look at the October and November Meg, they suggest that economic activity in quarter four remains positive, but slower than the previous year. Growth continues, but the momentum has eased, especially in industry and parts of services. This pattern may reflect in the upcoming quarter four GDP estimates. Ladies and gentlemen, to summarize, the key drivers of economic performance in November 2025 include one, crop production, two, digital and communication services, and three, public administration and social security services. Growth was constrained by weaker activity in the upstream petroleum sector. These forces together shaped the November 2025 outcome. Let me use this opportunity to reaffirm the commitment of the Ghana Statistical Service. We remain dedicated to producing timely, accurate, relevant, and credible statistics. Our goal is to support evidence-based decision-making for national development, guided by professionalism, transparency, and neutrality. Finally, we'd like to express our sincere appreciation to all data providing institutions, our development partners, and the hardworking staff of the Ghana Statistical Service whose dedication made this release possible. We count on your continued collaboration as we strengthen Ghana's statistical system. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Government Statistician, for the presentation. So, as Meg is a snapshot, we realize that the presentation was quicker than the previous one. So,
Yes.
we invite questions from you, clarification that you want us to make. So, if you have any question, please raise your hand. We'll give you the mic, then we'll make it snappy for us. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Justice. I work for the Suma News Agency.
Yes.
So, around the same time that we are looking at last year, it looked like gold, which is also an integral part of the extractives, was rallying quite high. So, does it mean that the weight of the oil and gas in industry is quite higher than that of gold? That's what I would like to know. So why gold couldn't, set off the maybe the losses brought on by oil and gas? Yeah, that's what I would. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. There's a hand up.
Good morning. My name is Joshua with the BNFT. So my question more or less is forward-looking. Given the recent efforts by the government with regards to oil and gas, trying to get investors within that space to expand production, in such a case, assuming that that happens, the effort becomes fruitful, how long would it take to reflect in the figures?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take some more.
Any other questions?
two questions. Basically, the first one is where we are seeing the weaker performance in industry when we have both gold and crude oil there. And yet, gold is performing well, but we are still seeing weaker performance in industry. So yes, you are spot on. In fact, gold has a higher weight compared to oil and gas. So you are very right there. And in fact, that's the reason why we saw industry growth actually end 2025 November at 0.4. This is because the contraction in crude oil was so prominent that in spite of the bigger weight we had in gold and also the positive performance we saw in gold, it still dragged industrial performance to 0.4. And also, if you saw the mining and quarrying, it actually was dragged down significantly because of the significant reduction in petroleum production. So that's the main reason. And then the second question was with regards to the efforts that are made to bring in more investment in the sector. I think that's a very good question. So usually it depends. I mean, if you're able to attract the investment as a country that we are looking for in the sector, it depends on how fast those investments translate into crude oil production. Once they translate immediately into crude oil production, we capture it in the statistics, because then GMPC would have reported that to us as increase in production, and that would reflect in the numbers. So I think it depends on how fast those investments translate into increased crude oil and gas production. Thank you very much.
So we thank you for your presence. Forward to having you for our next release. You'll be invited. So have a wonderful day and spread the message across. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.